Hello, and welcome to this episode of East Valley Business, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Diaz, President and CEO for the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. I am joined today by Jim Rounds with Rounds Consulting Group. Jim is an economist, somebody that is looked to quite often in the media, the private sector, business sector, education, has helped with a number of initiatives, has helped with a number of policies, and is an all-around great person. So, Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here, and that's a great introduction. I like that. Thank you.
All right, I'm available for road trips if need be. So, but for those that don't know you, can you share a little bit about yourself, maybe a couple of your career highlights, and then how did Rounds Consulting Group come to be?
Sure. So I was born in South Scottsdale. I always lived either in South Scottsdale or somewhere in Tempe. I'm a Tempe resident right now. My business is in Tempe. I went to ASU for my economic degrees, and then I went down to the state capitol. I did miss mentioning I was a Fry's Food Store's bagging champion one year.
All right.
So there was a lot of value in getting some of that experience at a younger age, which you don't see as much anymore.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like in the longer term, we have to figure out a way of letting some of the younger folks have some of that basic experience of having to show up on time and things like that. I left the Capitol and I went to work for another economic consulting firm for almost 15 years. And we took it from being more real estate focused to a big segment of it having to do with public policy and economics.
Okay.
So I started a firm with one of my colleagues at that office, and our expertise is in a lot of different areas. I mean, still real estate and other things like that, but my real love is economics and public policy, where you can not only as a consultant work on a project where you can pay the bills, treat your employees well, have good health care, all that other stuff, but you also are helping folks. And it's pretty satisfying. So the government portion I like quite a bit. And about a third of the business is in government. About a third of it is in the quasi-government, quasi-private sector, like chambers or a GPEC, Arizona Commerce Authority thing. And then we have the private sector work.
So you're doing well by doing good.
One of the things that we had to decide on early when we started, because things were going to be tough when you start a business. You always underestimate the extent that you're going to bring all the clients that love you at your old place. When you realize it's very difficult, especially government entities can't just leave and then follow you when things are tight. And I talked with my colleague, Luis Cordova, who's becoming one of the best economists in the state. And we had to decide, do we want to focus on doing the right thing? Do we want to turn down projects that we don't believe in? Or do we want to try to just go for revenue stability? And we both agreed, let's try to work on things that matter. Let's always be honest with the analyses. When somebody says, what's the cost of getting this result? We say, I don't know. You might have to go talk to somebody else about that. And in the long run, it paid off. And so I'm glad that we were able to do it that way.
I'm happy to hear that. I think that the integrity, we were just talking a little bit about media and press before, and I know growing up for me, journalistic integrity mattered. Whatever you do in your career, you should do with a level of respect and passion, but you should have some integrity in what you do. And I think that ultimately it speaks volumes to why you're asked to be interviewed so often, why you guys are used as consultants so often. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for also joining us earlier in the year at our Economic Outlook. We had a great fireside chat with Mayor Corey Woods. I don't know if you felt this, but for me, it was a great conversation that was probably anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours too short. So I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you will. If there was a topic that we didn't dive into enough or something that stands out, maybe even since then, that is a relevant topic, what's something that we should have discussed a little bit more or dive deeper on?
Well, we took a little extra time on that. In fact, I shaved a little bit of my presentation off because I was having such a good time. And you're right, we could have been talking for a couple of hours.
Absolutely.
So there'll definitely have to be like a regular coffee meeting or happy hour or something like that, where we could just get together and chat about stuff. But I really like our mayor, very solid. He's just very outgoing, Same with you. So it was an energetic
Appreciate that.
discussion. The one that really stuck with me was the more aggressive transportation plan that Corey brought up. And I'm now paying even more attention to the intersections and different places in Tempe where I could, see a little bit of improvements in the roads, or where my car nearly bottoms out in certain areas, but it's
Yep.
actually pretty good. We need to make improvements, but I really notice it in some other areas. When I drove down to Tucson to give a little
Oh,
presentation
yeah.
last week, getting off on Speedway, I went down in a little sports car, and I felt like I needed a four-wheel drive just to turn left off the freeway. So it's important, because I feel like that's the signal. I feel like transportation is the thing that tells others we have our house in order in terms of
Yep.
finances, because we can pay for it. We're focusing on the right things. It's that initial impression, it's that first impression that businesses get, but also residents. And I think we do a good job, but I like the more aggressive approach for it.
Well, speaking of aggressive, November, we have a ballot measure that'll look at a bond that will essentially address what would have taken, I think, 10 to 12 years to update and renovate a lot of our streets, and fast track that to about 4 years. So to your point about not just the attraction piece, because I will say I'm not going to speak ill of any communities, but there are definitely areas where, as they say, you're not in Kansas anymore. The streets are a little bit more rigid and rugged, and you tend to want to avoid those areas, or at least make alternate plans if you're going to be traveling through. So let's stay on the topic of infrastructure. Obviously, housing is a big challenge, something that keeps folks up at night. And our end, we always ask our members what keeps them up at night. What is the number one concern? And I'll get to one of the top ones. But in terms of housing, what are you seeing for a city that, in some would say, is landlocked? Our mayor tends to think that there's another way to look at that. Alternatively, but geographically, we're not able to physically expand out. So how do we address some of those housing needs? And I won't say affordable housing, more so housing affordability.
So affordable housing would be more, can we produce a lot more homes on smaller lots at a lower price? Um, uh, Affordable housing can be, are we earning enough income to pay for housing and other things in life too? And in communities like Tempe, you would expect the prices to be a little bit higher anyways. But we also have the university, and you all do a great job with coordinating workforce development programs with the city and other economic development groups. And I feel like that's the best way out of some inflationary problems that are going to be persistent. I feel like let's focus on the higher wage jobs. I'm not as concerned about any slower growth in population in the short term.
Right.
I'm more concerned about, are we adding higher wage jobs? And Tempe's so well positioned in that area. And I feel like back when I went to ASU, it's a completely different campus. All the little lots that I was able to speed into so I could make it to class on time. Now there's, 8-story buildings on those lots, and it's a wonderful little city. It's so impressive. So I feel like that partnership with the university, getting the right workers out there, just gives us an advantage, because we have first pick of the people. If they're already living in the area and they have a job opportunity, why not stay here? I mean, we send our graduates throughout the entire state, definitely throughout Greater Phoenix. So there's just there's certain advantages that you have when you're in a community that's the size that we are, and where we can focus on economic development because we have the right people in place. It's almost less the size of the city and more the quality of management. So with Corey, with the mayor, I really like, just because he's super thoughtful. With your organization and others, you know what you're talking about. It's not always the case when I deal with some other cities.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I will say, if there's kind of three pegs of the stool, you've got the city. We'd like to think of ourselves as one peg, and then the educational side of it. And we're fortunate, not just with ASU, but also working with Rio Salado College on some of our workforce skills accelerator to try to elevate folks that are in Tempe or come into Tempe to be able to meet the jobs of today and the future. In that same vein, as I said, I'll get to the topic that's probably the number one challenge for businesses. when you hear businesses today of all sizes, their number one, two, or three, top three challenge is finding and retaining a qualified workforce. What comes to mind when you hear that?
So it means different things to different people. If you're a large firm, it's volume. So
Yep.
if you're a TSMC, it's how can we coordinate on a big scale, like how they're coordinating with ASU
Right.
on engineers, how they're coordinating with the community colleges on those with technical degrees. When I think of workforce, you think of affordability, but I think it's being cost effective in that you want it to be affordable, but you want it to be higher quality. And so you don't just necessarily, when you go, say you go shopping for a TV, you don't just necessarily buy the cheapest TV, you look for the best value. It
Right.
might be, a mid-level TV, it might be something that's a little higher, but you're getting a lot of value compared to the price. I feel like we have to focus less on just a volume of job creation, volume of population growth, and focus on the quality. Because when we started seeing one of the measures, it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's per capita personal income. You just take personal income numbers, you divide it by population,
Right.
per capita personal income. We were declining for decades in that category. And that's, you compare it to a benchmark like the US, we were declining. So our economy was becoming worse over time. After the Great Recession, there was a complete overhaul of statewide public policy, but the cities had to do a lot too. And so everybody working together since that point, it was around 2011,
Right.
when a lot of new policy was put in place, we've seen this slow upward tick in per capita personal income. So we've been adding higher wage jobs. We've been promoting the right things, which means we have that labor that's available for these businesses. But some of the businesses need some hyper specific skill sets. So we have to make sure that people, I want to say you first start with kids. You want the kids that are in high school to get a rough idea of what they want to do. And then you want to, keep that going. But to be honest, when I was in high school, it was all about my 66 Chevelle.
Yep.
When I was in the first couple of years of college, there's different priorities.
Right.
And then you try to figure out what you want to do. But even on that, I would like it to be where people could figure out what they want to do with their workforce, because they'll be happier longer term, what they want to do for their careers. I fell into place because of a great professor at ASU, Dennis Hoffman, pressured me. I was a very nervous introvert, and I would get sick if I had to give a speech. He said, go apply to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. You'll have to give presentations to the legislature. And I thought, no.
I'm thankful for him. It turned out pretty well for you.
He was a great mentor, and he pressured me into that a little bit. But having that mentor offset the fact that I didn't know what I want to do. So I kind of fell into that by accident because somebody stepped up for me. I would like us to not be in that position with others. But at the same time, people in high school don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do. We have to find that right balance of, yes, you want to educate the kids on their different options early, but a lot of them don't know what they want to do. A lot of them are going to have to go to a university to figure some of this stuff out. And analysis that we did for the Board of Regents, we found that it's not so much do we want more bachelor's or do we want more technical degrees. We're short on bachelor's degrees and we're short on the technical degrees. And we can't grow at the same rate that we're growing at unless we go beyond just trying to import our labor. We have to grow our own. And if we don't, everything will balance out, but it's going to balance out by our rate of growth slowing. And that's what I'd hate to see.
Well, it's interesting concept. I was having this conversation with someone the other day that our labor market and our housing market are very similar when people look at, we need more of this or we need more of that. And the reality is we need more of all of it. And the infrastructure and the process of which we're growing local talent, like you said, here, and also attracting talent from abroad. They're both important elements. So I appreciate you sharing that. And you highlighted something that I want to touch on. So Maricopa is the fastest growing, or one or two, depending on the study, fastest growing counties in the country, and has been for the last couple of years. And there's been conversations that over the next 10 years, we're going to see the Phoenix Metro, I don't know if it's quite double, but it's going to grow exponentially. When you look at infrastructure, when you look at policies that are in place, you mentioned transportation earlier, what are some maybe warnings or suggestions that you have, whether it be for policymakers or even within the businesses to take a look at?
So the real expensive stuff like transportation, what I've learned is you can't get behind, because if you get behind, you can't catch up. So you have to keep pushing forward on transportation investments. And we've done some analyses on extension of different transportation taxes, either for maintenance or for new roads, whatever it might be, in multiple counties. And the economic development benefits usually cover the costs of the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is so tied to the ability to develop the businesses. But workforce is an area where I'm pretty worried about, because again, I don't think we can maintain the recent success in locating a lot of these new businesses that are going to require a skilled workforce if it's just going to be importing. And with Maricopa County, we could be number one, we could fall to 4, we could jump back up to 2. Within the margin of error, you can just generally say top 5. So we have good population growth, but that'll only continue if we have job growth. So I'm less concerned about the fluctuation in the county population. I'm more interested in the jobs that then bring the population in, and there's a match. Economics can get out of balance, as we saw during the COVID recession, the Great Recession having to do with housing. It always gets back into balance. If you're not proactive, things will get back into balance. Home prices will come down because our growth is going to slow. If we're proactive, we can figure out a way of balancing that. And where I see a failure, though, is it's usually at the state level, where people see a bill that does something with housing and they say, this is binary, it's either this or nothing. Well, there was a bill that was going through to the governor's desk on housing, and it was very much dominated by the developers and not by as much input from the cities. And we did a lot of work on this last year. There was a bill to start with, and we encouraged the governor's office to veto it. She ultimately did, because of a lot of feedback from the mayors and others, and maybe even a little bit of our feedback. But I also recommended, but very fiercely say, I want another bill on my desk. So we need more dynamic thinkers, because right now they'll say, well, we sent a bill, you vetoed it, you're against housing. It's like, no, I'm against this bill, send me another. And that's where politics messes up. People partnering and being able to get together. 10 years ago, when we were in 2011, a little bit more than 10 years ago, when we got together and we wrote this jobs bill with Andy Tobin, Kirk Adams in the House, and some other staff that have gone on to, even bigger things since then. That was truly working across the political aisle. We had Democrats looking at the validity of a couple of tax cuts. We had economic development programs supported by the Republicans. That's how it needs to get. We have to get back to that again. I'm afraid we've gotten a little bit too far away from that, at the state level, at least.
All right. That was a perfect transition to, and I'll keep this as high level as you'd like to, without getting into the political weeds. Apparently we have an election in November. Thoughts on, I think this is kind of a chicken and egg. Is there correction that is available with the current state that we have with both parties? Or do you think we've got to hit kind of a rock bottom state before changes come? Because the bipartisan policies tend to be the ones that are not only most widely supported, but usually are the ones that have the greatest sustainable power over time. You can look at whether it be infrastructure, whether it be relationship between the federal and state, or state and local municipalities. Usually when it's pushed through from one party to the other, it's sitting there for however long until it's going to be repealed by the other party. And we're definitely in a volatile state. But I think generally speaking, most folks would agree there's some disenfranchisement, with both parties. And there's a little bit more of a moderate one direction or the other. Thoughts about the upcoming election, not necessarily who's going to win or not, but what are some things that are at stake that we have that from an economic standpoint?
I feel like we haven't hit rock bottom yet. And I love politics and public policy, and my intent was to do the consulting a little bit longer, turn the business over to my colleagues eventually, and then maybe run for state senate. And then maybe treasurer. I don't think I could ever make it beyond that. And I had friends tell me before, we could probably help you get elected, but you won't get reelected because you got too big of a mouth. And now it's, no, you got your principles remain. So we might have a hard time getting you elected in the first place. So I feel like there's still room there, but if we can't change the policymakers, we have to change the messaging on the policy. And one thing that we kind of created in our office is it started on healthcare and hospital issues back during COVID,
Right.
and we continued it through education and others, is we started bringing in the return on investment discussion and modeling into projects at the Capitol. And so, for example, that's how we helped the universities get some extra funding for engineering and others, because we converted their program that was going to cost a certain amount each year into what are the extra tax benefits of having this heightened workforce and these additional businesses coming in, and are we going to get a positive ROI within a reasonable amount of time for the taxpayer? Well, that cuts across the political aisle, because if somebody wants that extra revenue to be spent on programs, then they're going to have it. If they want it to be spent on reduced fees and taxes, they're going to have it. Hopefully it would be a combination of the two. But talking about ROI and doing all the math and having the same people maintain that level of being credible over a longer term. So like I was saying at the beginning, our main goal was to maintain our integrity and have people trust our numbers. You feel the same. Our mayor feels the same way. And so you can continue that messaging, but people have to trust what you're doing, but you have to do more math. I feel like math may be the nerdy solution to solving some of the public policy or political areas where we can't get people on the same page.
So you are saying that a subject that we learn in elementary school is relevant today?
You know what? When I talk about percent issues and rates of growth, I actually say fourth grade math is one of my things. If you fall by 50% in an economic category, you got to grow by 100% to get back to where you were before.
Very true.
Unfortunately, with some groups, I actually had to take $1 out of my pocket on one side and 50 cents out on the other, and I had to actually use props. But it doesn't matter as long as you can get through to people. But you got to do the right math, and then they have to trust your messaging, and then you have to be willing to hand it off to our political leaders. They need to own it, and then you step back and let them run with it and get it implemented. So I feel like I don't want to say referees. I feel like we might be the people that put the ball on the tee at the beginning of the game, and then we disappear. So if we can help tee up some ideas, and then we go into the shadows, and then when somebody starts to mess something up, we whisper in somebody's ear, "No, you read that wrong. Look at table 6 instead of 7." We'll come back in, but that's the goal: is to be an idea person like you guys are, but then step back and let our elected leaders implement.
So an analogy came to my mind as you're saying that, and maybe it's because I was just at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, but you're a great caddy, or you're kind of whispering in the ear of, this is the shot you're looking at. They make a mistake. Hey, maybe take a look at this next time. But nobody remembers who the caddy is except for maybe the caddy's family, but they remember the golfer. So
you know what, my next speech, my next PowerPoint, because most of my speeches are PowerPoints, I'm gonna have a caddy on one of those.
You should.
Yeah. That's great.
Well, thank you for joining today. But I wanted to give you an opportunity. Any final thoughts for our audience? It ranges from our residents in our community to business owners, employees, elected officials. Any final thoughts? And you can go in any direction you'd like.
Yeah, be involved in public policy when you can. It's more interesting than you would think, but sometimes you got to dig a little bit deeper than the promotion campaigns or some of the dogma that is published by each political party, or when you see the signs on the side of the road. But attend events like what you would put on. I think it's worthwhile just to go down and sit in a city council meeting and listen to the people. And I think it's worthwhile to also get engaged at the state level and at the county level. These people are really good people, but often you hear about them through news stories that can be a little bit gossipy in some cases, or it's not a really accurate news story. It's more of an entertainment piece, delivered as news. Be involved. It's way more interesting than you would think, and you can actually have an impact by being a speaker at a particular hearing, or by providing an email in support of somebody, or especially at the local level, at the city level, going down there. And if you were like me and was very nervous at the very beginning of my career where I couldn't speak, and now I've given maybe 1,000 speeches at this point, it's kind of fun to overcome something. Be brave.
That's true.
Go down, maybe stand at the podium at least once, have that as a goal, and you'll feel more connected to your community.
Well, I don't know if I could have given any better advice. So thank you, Jim, for joining us today, and thank you for listening to this episode of East Valley Business, the podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and join us in the future. Thank you.